All right. So first and last name.
Micah LaCerte.
Okay, perfect. All right. In 3, 2, 1. So many of us keep these deeply held secrets, things that if we would share, maybe it'd help change our lives. But there's fear, there's shame, there's guilt, there's not enoughness. There's so much to these things that we hold on to that we don't even know what to do with them. And the hard part about these things, whatever they might be, is the closer we keep them in, the more that they start to eat us alive. And in my own journey, as many of you know, I've shared many of my darkest secrets here on the show. And not because there are things that I need to put out into the world because somehow I think if I do, life will get better, but more so because I want other people to understand that they're not alone. And that's exactly the conversation that we're going to have with today's guest, my friend, Micah LaCerte. Micah, welcome to the show, my friend.
Happy to be here, man. Blessing.
Super excited to have you. I mean, your journey is absolutely unbelievable. We'll get into your story and some of your huge accomplishments. But first, why should anyone listen to our conversation today?
We're going into the depths. I think, in society, especially on the male side of things, vulnerability is looked at as a weakness. And I want to show that vulnerability is actually your biggest strength. So many of those pains that we carry as a child are held in silence, and it destroys us. And today I just want to show the other side of that, the freedom of no longer having that grip of that shame and that pain that we go through as a child.
Yeah. And that's, man, you talk about an unlock. When I think about my journey, by the time that I was 29, I mean, my life was a complete disaster working through things in a lot of ways because there were so many secrets that I was just so afraid to get into. And one of them, as many people know who have listened to this show over the year, is being molested by a member of the Mormon church. Going to my mother, telling her my story, and her telling me, never talk about this again. This didn't happen. And a big reason why, I mean, we were very poor. We were impoverished, and sometimes the church would pay our bills or buy us food or whatever the thing was that we got out of them. And that ate me alive. And I think that for so many, not even just men, obviously women who listen to the show, but for so many men, a lot of them who I have been able to connect with, like you, over the years, we kind of carry this secret on the inside, but it's not until you expose it do you start to take your power back from it. And that was really the reason why I started sharing my story. So I'd love you to take us back a little bit into the decision for you to start having this conversation, especially as a public figure publicly.
Yeah, I knew that it was time. I had accomplished a lot in my career and what a lot of people would look at as very successful. I have a very happy marriage. But I was hiding that secret that you know all so well. Our stories are so similar in a lot of ways. And I knew that I couldn't continue going forward and be really the man I was created to be by continuing to hold that weight and that bondage that sexual abuse had really torn me. I was smiling on the outside, inside it was honestly destroying me. I was living in a place of what I call pain tolerance, not freedom. And now being on the other side of that, I truly understand. And then being blessed with the platform that I do have, I knew I was called into being a very strong masculine voice in a space that still is being swept under the rug. And I think we're finally at a point in society where we get enough really strong voices and men voices to speak up, we can really go out and move mountains with this.
I agree. And I think that it's one of those things that it does require a lot of courage. And so I'd love for you to take us back a little bit and just share your story. Obviously, we don't need to go into the gory details of it. But, if for me, I think if a big part of this is unlocking and giving people permission, I think that sharing our story is one of the most important things that we can do.
Yeah. And one thing I say often is, our biggest purpose or our greatest purpose in our lives, I truly believe is revealed through the healing of your biggest or most vicious pain that you're holding. And being on the other side of that now, you're perfectly positioned to help the person you once were. And so I had to go through my own journey to now be in the situation to be able to speak into any man that comes in front of me. I knew that if I only got to a certain place, there was going to come a time where an individual I was able to speak to, I couldn't authentically be able to share the story if I was still in a place that was only maintaining my pain, not in true freedom. I didn't understand true freedom until I got to the other side of that. And now being able to share this with almost just like it's a blessing to be able to share this. As weird as that sounds, because it's such a shameful and what a lot of guys look at as like a disgusting thing to go through, and how confusing that is and how damaging it is. But on the other side of it, I truly believe you get a superpower to be able to have one of the greatest purposes of your life, of going through the trenches, the swamplands of what child sexual abuse, is, and then getting on the other side and being able to help men, go down that same path that you did to get to a place to be able to help others. And I truly believe that's where it is. So to go all the way back, it really starts your story very similar to mine. I didn't have a father figure in the home. It was my mom and I. I was a very joyful kid. I was an athlete growing up. And my mom realized, though, at an early age that I really needed that dad figure. And this man came into my life around the age of 5. And at that point, my innocence was stolen. I didn't realize it at the time, and he did, and my mom didn't either. But this is where the grooming and the manipulation started. This was a man of the church. He was a deacon at the church. So he was using God's name in vain at the highest, most vicious, evil way of doing it, and that is to abuse a child in that way. And so over the course of 10 years, I was sexually abused badly. And I just remember being that little boy that had all this joy. And then the moment that that happened, I completely changed inside and out. I I remember saying, okay, I am going to never tell anyone. I'm going to lock this up in this safe inside of me. I'll never share this with anyone ever. Imagine what people will think. The judgment. I'm going to be the abused kid. I'll never get a girlfriend. The shame that's in that. And you're just a little boy, right? And so you don't understand. Like your brain is not developed. And then the confusion of is this was a man that I loved. I looked at as a father. So I had a lot of confusion as well. So there's this sexual abuse that was going on, but also this spiritual abuse, and those are two very different abuses that you have to get through the healing of. I have a very strong faith relationship now, but I stepped away from the Lord and from Christ for 15 years. When I thought He wasn't there and protecting me, and so that was a different area, but I didn't turn to things like drugs and alcohol that a lot of men do. So when you go through sexual abuse, it's very common. The longer that we hold that, it eventually manifests into things like addictions. So it's pornography, it's food, it's drugs, it's alcohol. It destroys you very slowly. And so I didn't turn to those things because I grew up, a few of my stepfathers, one of them was an alcoholic. I saw the abuse of alcohol. And then my other one had issues with drugs and suicidal type of things that were going on there. So I had seen these things that I had associated to something very, very bad. So for whatever reason, at a very young age, I was like, I'm not going to do those things. So I turned to accolades and success. My abuse stopped at the age of 15. Around that point, I'm almost dead. Like it has almost killed me. And at the age of 18, and really a lifeline and a family that came in around that time, they brought me into their home, and I saw love, and I was finally in a home that was safe for a period of time. And then when I got to college, I say my second lifeline was in the form of dumbbells and chicken breast. And for me, that lifestyle, it really transformed my life and transformed my mind. I was dealing with anxiety and depression, which you know really well, Michael, and what that happens after abuse like that. And I didn't know at the time because I just wanted to build bigger muscles and I wanted girls to like me and I wanted to be on like the guys on covers of magazines. But ultimately, I was just still trying to protect the 5-year-old little boy inside of me that was hurt. And I'll tell you, like, I started working out, and within weeks, I started feeling better. My depression, my anxiety started suppressing, and I found this new purpose, and my identity and my confidence started raising. And there is a lot in between that, but that's kind of the journey that started me from the abuse and the pain and all the the stuff that's in between there, and depression, suicidal thoughts, all of that, to then being able to finally breathe a little bit through fitness.
My first thought is, I'm sorry that we have that in common.
Mm,
I think about these stories and the space I've gotten a hold for not only people on the podcast, but also in my coaching programs, or people after I do speaking events or signing books or whatever it is that I'm doing. And it's just the first thing I think. I'm like, of all the cool shit we could have in common, it's like, this is the least cool thing we could ever have in common. You know what I mean? And and that, to me, it bothers me tremendously. And that's why a big part of why I created the show so many years ago is to give a voice, not only to give a voice, but also to give space to helping people understand that they're not alone and that there's a path out of this. You talk about at 15 years old. I mean, when I was 14, I took a whole fucking bottle of ibuprofen. I was
mhm.
like, I'm done. I
Yeah,
and I woke up on the bathroom floor covered in vomit because I was like, I'm apparently ibuprofen doesn't kill you, but you're going to puke it all up. And that was just, I was in such a dark place, not only because of the sexual abuse that I went through, but also my mom's drug addiction had just completely gone off the rails. And it's funny. One of the things that I've done a lot over the years is try to understand data. And there were some data points I'd put together here in preparation for our conversation. And one of the hard parts about data, especially around sexual abuse, is there's so much non-report and misconstrued reporting that happens that it's really hard to get a solid figure, especially when it comes to men and boys who suffer. The statistics tend to be a little stronger for young girls and women, but even still, I mean, God, there's so many unreports. And one of the interesting things that almost across the board sexual abuse has in common in the home is that on average, 69% of all childhood sexual abuse cases are from homes that are either homes that are single parent homes or homes that are non-intact, meaning a parent's divorced or there's always chaos or whatever it is. And like you, I grew up never meeting my father. I've never had a conversation with the man. I've never met him. My stepdad, alcoholic, drug addict, monster, and so you have all these children growing up in these crazy ass environments. And the thing that happens more often than not, now addiction is going to tend to rear its head because we're looking for something to like satiate the feeling of that chaos. And it's interesting because you can go addiction, and we're going to get into this because I'm sure you have stories. You can go addiction into fitness and health and business. And I would argue at times that's just as bad as sex and drugs and porn and women
yeah.
and or men, right? And so when I had to like sit in the reaping, if you will, of my experience, dude, it was so bad. I was 350 pounds, smoking 2 packs a day, drinking myself to sleep, hooking up with an ungodly number of people, always putting myself in very dangerous situations. And one of the really weird part, it's kind of encouraged by the people around me. And it's crazy because you see that in business too. You see
Yeah.
that in fitness too. And so much of this, it's just such this direct parallel. And so I'm curious, in your own experience, what was it like for you to start to navigate the process of the healing of this? Because for me, there was a moment where I was sitting, I was looking at my life. I've shared this story many times before. I'm 350 pounds, laying in bed, eating chocolate cake, smoking a joint, and watching the freaking CrossFit games. And I'm like, this is my life. And so I'm wondering for you, what was the kind of I don't want to necessarily say rock bottom moment because I don't know that everyone has a rock bottom, but typically they do. So I'm wondering, like, what was the aha moment where you're like, I have to actually do something about this? And then what was the process right in that space? Because this is the place where I feel people sit in it, especially men, and they believe I have to do something about this. but the sheer terror, and I mean that in like
Yeah.
a literal sense, keeps them stuck. So
Yeah.
what was that like for you?
So my rock bottom moment was around the age of 15, but I was not ready to share my story at that particular point. I was going to hold it to the grave. I had made that commitment to myself at that age. And to share a little bit more about the story, it's in the book too. It's like at 19, I get called by a detective. And this was the first time that I was going to share it outside of with my mother. And I had to go let him know what this man had done to me because he got caught. And so my guy ended up actually going to prison. And so there's a huge story in all of that too, and how that full circled many, many years later in my life. But my almost come to Jesus moment with the healing side of things actually happened 9 years ago. So I was in a place of like I call pain tolerance. I didn't turn to drugs, alcohol, that sort of stuff. I turned to accolades and success. I was on covers of magazines. I was a world champion. I was on reality TV shows. My hit was coming from the next cover of a fitness magazine. And some people me, dude, that's an awesome thing. Yeah, but it was from a very deep rooted, painful, shameful place. I was not able to celebrate any of it. And I'm getting all this praise and I don't feel an ounce of it. I feel hollow and I feel like a
Mm.
fraud in a lot of ways because I'm still protecting what happened to me. And so my wife, God blessed me with an amazing, amazing wife. And she has always been just so supportive. I told my wife very early on in our relationship, very early, what happened to me. And she said, when you're ready to actually heal and you go through this process, then I'm going to be there with you. And that was huge because we know we have to have a safe home to do that. So 9 years ago, I was at a concert. There's a Christian artist named Carrie Job. The song Forever comes on. And in that moment, I am just like weeping, man. I'm out of control weeping. And I'm like, what is going on? And I get these two visions. One of them was to go see our children in Haiti. We sponsor a school of kids in Haiti. I wanted to go see my kids for the first time. The second thing was I was on a stage sharing my story to a large group. And I just remember I was like, there is no way in the world that I am going to go do that. There's no way. And I felt so uncomfortable. I said, and I talked to my wife and I said, I think God just called me to go do this. And it's finally time to do this. And she goes, then we need to navigate this. And I didn't know what to do. Like a lot of guys, you're going to hear this a lot. Like, okay, where do I even go with this? What are the steps? What's the journey? What's the roadmap? As guys, we need a step by step on what we're supposed to do. And I had idea where to go. I went on the internet, kind of looked up some research and who am I supposed to talk to? I don't want to talk to a counselor. Like, I don't want to do any of that. And that's kind of where I was at that particular point. And so I wake up ridiculously early every morning. Just it's my lifestyle. And I was just called to come into the room that I'm in right now. And I sat down and I started writing and journaling. And so I wrote 50,000 words over the course of multiple years. And I went back to each one of those moments that I could remember. And God was opening me up and opening me up. And through that process, I was able to kind of navigate the healing. And it took me 7 full years. And then January of 2024, I stepped on stage at a big conference that we hosted in Tampa. And I shared my story for the first time. And it was the scariest moment of my life, the hardest moment to get to, and the most freeing, unbelievable moment of my life as well, all at the same time. And I got off that stage, Michael, and I knew what my purpose was at that particular point. I get off the stage and more than 10% of the audience came up to me, CEOs, top level dudes and women and whatnot, and said, thank you for your courage. I went through that too. And I was like, okay. And then almost day by day by day, I would end up talking to someone who had gone through it. And I just got more comfortable in speaking about it and really knowing what the purpose behind it was.
Hmm. It's powerful, man. It's there's so many deep reflections that I feel for my own experience in this. One of the hardest things that I ever did, I was in this relationship with this amazing woman when I was in my early mid 20s, and yet I was doing everything wrong. And she just knew that there was something in me that was hurt. And I give her the world of credit, because I would have told me to go fuck myself.
Yeah.
And she just stood by, and she stood by until one day I finally broke down, man, and I sat down on the bed next to her and I just told the truth. And like, even this moment, like, my heart rate is up just thinking about it, because that was the scariest moment of my life. Dude, I've spoken in front of 10,000 people on
Yeah. Yeah.
stages. Millions of people have listened to this podcast. I've been on television. Like, nothing
Hmm.
ever in my life was as scary as the moment I told the truth for the first time, and the truth about what had happened to me in my childhood, and to someone who loved me. Right. And I think so many people suffer through this idea that if they tell the truth, they're no longer going to be lovable. They're no
Yeah.
longer going to matter. They're no longer going to have the relationship or the partner there who they think that they're supposed to have in their life. And I just have come to this place for myself where I'm like, you're a shadow of yourself if you do not sit across from the person that you love the most in the world and tell them the truth. And more so, if they're not there to fix you, by the way, and they're not there
Mm-mm.
to solve the problem, but they're there to hold space for you. And if they don't, you might have the wrong person.
Yeah.
And that's a hard reality, because you're like, I'm sharing the most vulnerable thing I've ever shared and I might get rejected. The truth is, you might. And so maybe you sit with a professional first. Maybe you do what Micah did and you sit and you write. I've written 4 books. 3 of them have been published. One of them will get published when I die. And the first one that I ever wrote was similar to you. I sat and I wrote my entire life story. And it's probably about 85,000 words as of this moment. And it just sits there in this folder on my computer, that one day when I'm dead, it will go out into the world full of everything about my experience in my life. And the thing that I was thinking as you were speaking is, there's this really interesting experience that I think a lot of people have, because I certainly did, where you can have the accolades, where you can have the success, where you can have the people on the outside looking in. But you said, man, I never felt it. I felt like a fraud. I felt like I'm not actually that person. I felt like I was playing a role. I was pretending to be this young, successful business guy running these companies, doing this shit. And I was just in pure suffering every moment of the day. How did you transform your experience from, I feel like, fraud, to actually accepting that you were worthy of the things that you were doing?
Yeah, that's and I have to touch base with you real quick. What you just said, because you had told us as a child your mother rejected when you told her, and then this girlfriend that you were with at the time, she held it with you, not trying to fix it. I think we just got to be aware in those moments too that there are people that don't know how to actually do that. They're just trying to fix things. So I love that you had the courage enough to do that. I just wanted to make that statement because that takes a lot of courage and vulnerability in that moment. For me, you know, I think being able to finally get the weight off, and I kind of use it as a vision of like I was carrying 200 pounds, not only in the swamplands and finally getting to a dry place, but then I'm climbing a mountain with 200 extra pounds off of me. So when I was able to release that day, and then in the upcoming months, something really big happened too. I I I knew at that point that I was free of what had gripped me for so long. There was still scar tissues there of what I had gone through. Those scars will always remain. I think a lot of people think, oh, you go through something like that, you can never forget that. I won't ever forget that. I just use it as a superpower now, not as something I don't worship my wounds anymore. I don't play a victim card anymore. I'm using it to be a bigger purpose for someone else's life. And that, I think, is the transition that happens in the healing process, where it's like, I truly believe now that I can help someone else, a group of men, thousands of men, millions of men, be able to be the man they were created to be the father they need to be the husband they need to be, the leader they need to be, because they are living in that same exact struggle and suffocation that we had, which is the shame just gripping us constantly. It didn't matter what we accomplished. Didn't matter what hit you did, it wasn't fulfilling. It was never going to amount to what true freedom was, although that's what we wanted. And so I think that, for me, getting that weight off and now being able to speak about it publicly, and almost there's a deep fire in me that burns so much hotter than any world championship or any cover of a magazine or any next 7-figure deal or whatnot that I've ever had in my life. Like it carries a purpose that's so much larger than myself, and that in itself keeps me going every single day to want to help as many people as I can.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I resonate. When I go and I look back at the beginning of this, almost a decade ago now, I never anticipated what it would do and what it would be. It was just me looking at hopefully sharing information that would help people, because I'm a writer and I was writing and I was putting blogs out, and I hope that my brothers would read them, and I hope that the people around me would understand me better. And it was a way for me to express myself as well. And then it turned into whatever it has become and what it will become as we're transitioning in a lot of things now. And the thing that I always come back to, I had to start with me. And that's so difficult because I think, and especially when you're talking about the scope of men, and this is probably very topical because of the time, Louis Theroux's new documentary came out about the manosphere just this past week. And I see these guys out in the world, some of them I know, like, and I watch the way that they handle themselves as men, whether it be the Andrew Tates or the Wallers or the Myrons and all these guys. And I just think to myself, these are some of the most hurt men in the world. Like, this is not how masculine, actual, real men behave, because that's how I used to behave, Micah. Like, I'll put this out there. When I was hurt and a lost little boy in my teens and my 20s, how these guys were speaking and acting and professing, that's how I was, to a T. Like, when I watch these guys, I can't help but think to myself, man, they got hurt so bad and they cannot let go of it. And look, and sometimes it's a superpower, dude. You get rich, you get a great body, you get hooked up with a bunch of women, and it feels good until the moment you're on your deathbed and you realize you never genuinely allowed anyone to care about you. And the thing that I'm thinking as I'm watching what's happening in our world right now, and all of these young boys falling into this path because now they've been hurt by society, right? Especially if they've walked through sexual abuse or emotional mental abuse in the home. And so they think the thing is that they have to protect themselves, and protecting themselves is, big muscles and big house and big cars and all the women. And I think that's actually the very thing that's hurting a lot of them, because they don't recognize what I think also just the time frame that we grew up is very different than them, but they need masculine men like us. And masculinity has gotten such a bad rep over the last 15 to 20 years, where honestly, dude, my best friends and I, we talk about this, where I'm like, it's hard being a man. It's like really hard being a man today, but I still show up. We still do it. We still lead the way we think that we're supposed to. We take care, we provide, we do our best. But when we sit here and we watch these guys out in the world, you have these two scopes of what I see around these people who are talking about boys and their transition into manhood, masculine energy, masculine energy, and this healing journey. And it's so convoluted, but I generally see two things. I see that camp, the manosphere guys, and then I see the very incredibly, people are going to take this the wrong way, and I don't mean it to be. It's just how I see the world. These men who I would not walk into a war with. These men who I would not trust at the gym to hold the barbell. These men we all need softness. We all need that other side of the energy and the feminine energy. And I don't think Sigma, Alpha, Beta, like, that's whatever. Who cares about that? But I see men who are not stepping up, and yet they're talking about the healing journey. And everybody needs a different voice. So let me be clear about that, because I need a different voice. And trust me, I'm not going to connect to the very soft person. I grew up playing 4 sports and I like combat. Like, I need the hardcore guy in my face who's like, yeah, dude, I can hug you and we can also like go and fuck some shit up. But I'm really curious for you as this, for lack of a better way to phrase it, this man who men have been looking up to for a very long time. How do you handle and navigate this conversation when all of this chaos is surrounding us and people are getting driven in all of these different directions and they don't know who to anchor to?
Yeah, I'm in full agreement with you. When I see a lot of those guys, I see exactly what you see, and we see it and understand it because we've gone through it and have been there. Right. And so I actually, those are the type of guys that I'm actually like praying for, because I'm like, what society doesn't know is what that man is still protecting. And he has gone super hyper to the area of having to have all these things to fulfill. And the reality of the situation is the perception that they've now created is not, it's more than likely not accurate. And I don't know their full stories, but when like when you see someone that is at that particular level, it's very, very common that something childhood happened that they're still holding on to. And so, for me in general, my faith means a lot to me. I would definitely consider myself a very masculine man in a lot of ways. I love to be a covering for my wife and have the strength that's necessary to do that. A strong leader in the different spaces that I'm in. But I think the strongest man is the one that can balance out that masculinity side and also the vulnerable side, and utilizing that when it's needed. Right? Because I have no problem when I am in a situation with a man that has gone through tremendous things to allow myself to get emotional so he can see inside and what I truly am, not just the muscles that cover me, but what I truly am, so that it will open him up. To me, that is true masculinity, and being able to actually truly serve another human being. And that to me is how I define masculinity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a big part of it, is to be able to hold space, right? I think there's strength in it. And I think that can be very scary because there's also a lot of responsibility that
Yeah.
comes along with that. But there's a lot of people who, especially young boys, where they come down the path that we went. And Micah, you and I went in very opposite directions, right? We have some parallels in success in business, working out some of the things there. But whereas you went one way and I went another way, on a long enough timeline, I think if you start to do healing, you kind of end up where we are.
Yeah.
I've just seen it happen too often not to believe that that's true. But I'm curious, what would you impart in someone, a young man who's listening right now, or their mother who might be listening, or their wife who might be listening, and they're like, I know that something happened to him. You can see it in his, we wear it on our face, man. I look like I was 47 when I was 17, and it's like, what would you impart on the people who are supporting them? What would you give them? How would you tell them to be able to stand in this arena?
So the first thing is don't pressure him into saying something that he's not ready to say. And that can be a little bit disappointing because you know that he's more than likely gone through something. You're seeing, especially the deeper you get into, if you start researching trauma, male sexual trauma as a child and whatnot, you're going to start seeing patterns with the man that you're with, whether it be your brother, your husband, your father, whatever that may be, your son. But what needs to happen is he needs to know that you're an extremely safe place for him, and a safe person for him, that you're there to support him. You don't have to go into what the subject is, and just let him know that if and when he's ever ready, that you are there to hold that story with him. And like you mentioned before, it's so incredibly crucial. If this man has finally gotten to a point, or your son has finally gotten to a point where he comes to you and he shares this, you have to understand this is the hardest moment of his life. This is the scariest moment of his life. And how you respond is literally like life and death to him. And so you can fill him full of life by holding that story, not trying to fix him, or you can kill it by stopping him from talking because it's uncomfortable, or from denying that it ever happened, or don't ever share this ever again. That will destroy a man. It's very rare that, after being told what, you were by your mother, that you actually had enough courage to do it. And that's why I said that, because a lot of the times, if a man is told when he was a child, don't ever bring this up again, a lot of the times they don't ever again. And so I'm so thankful that you had the courage to do that. But, for those people that are holding that space, it is so incredibly crucial. And I do believe it's the first step for healing for that man or that boy.
Yes. And I'll add to this, because it was my experience with my mother telling me to never talk about being molested. I felt like I didn't matter. I was unlovable. I mean, there was so much shame and guilt. Plus, I was in the Mormon church, and I was a Boy Scout, and I was an athlete, and and I'm 6'4", 220, and I'm a big man covered in tattoos, and all these things transpired in my life. But I was sitting and looking at the space that I was in at 25, 26, 27 years old, and I'm just like, this cannot be what is in front of me. And to be honest with you, Micah, the thing that pulled me into the courage of that moment of sharing it again is because I was going to kill myself.
Yeah. Yep.
That's just the truth. I was just like, if I don't tell someone, I'm going to explode into a million pieces, and I might take somebody with me.
Yeah.
And it was me sitting in that moment and having a huge amount of fear and being like, fuck it. And that's really what it was. And so I would encourage anyone who's listening, whether you're a man or a woman, and you've walked this path, you've suffered in any capacity, the first time you speak about this will be the most freeing thing that you ever experience, if you're doing it within a space that is meant to hold you. And that's why support groups are so incredible, and therapy is so incredible, and coaching programs, and even speaking with men like Micah is so powerful, because we've been there. Mike, I have this question that I wrote as you were talking, because I started thinking about it. I think that I shared again because I was going to explode. But I think there's men who have never even contemplated it because they feel shame, they feel guilt, they feel weak, and most importantly, probably above all, they hate themselves.
Yeah.
What would you give those guys?
Yeah, I mean, and I think there's another layer too. I think there's a lot of men that it happened so long ago that they totally suppressed it and they don't even remember it.
Absolutely.
And because every situation is slightly different. We talk about the healing. Well, the healing is always different depending on the severity. Did it happen from another child that was the same age as you? Is there confusion from that? Did it happen from an adult like us that manipulated through faith? There's so many different layers. Was it sex trafficking? There's like so many different layers that are there. And, for that person that's out there that is, they don't know where to go, what to do, what to say, or what not. I would say it's one of the most difficult things to do, and it takes the most courage to do it. But again, like we said, both of us had said, it's also the most freeing thing to do that. And so when you're looking at it, you may not be ready to go to a group and sit down. You may not be able to, be like, say, I don't want to go to a counseling. Like, I didn't go to a counselor because I had trauma from counseling. So I had associated a mother that went to counseling for 30 years and got worse. And so I was like, that's not the route that I'm going to go. You got to know your own journey. You got to know what steps you're willing to take in it. But you also have to make that first step, which is committing to healing. I want to get better. In that moment, you were like, I'm going to explode. I'm going to either take my life and take someone with me, or I got to just open up and finally share this. And the sad part about it, and we talk about stats a lot, we know it's 1 in 4, 1 in 5 men approximately in that has gone through something similar as us. It takes 21 years on average, and then it takes 28 years for full like detail of it, 21 for disclosure, 28 for detail. We think about that, but then what is it? 70, 80, 90% plus men never say a word and it kills them. So when you're in that moment and you're like, dude, I don't want to live anymore, I would just say that there is hope in that courage. It's going to be the strongest thing that you ever do, and really connect what your shame is and your pain into something that is incredibly strong. And then on the other side of this, I hear it all the time. They're like, dude, you're the strongest man I've ever met. You're so courageous and whatnot. That's good to hear because I can feel that now, but it required me going through the healing and the necessary healing and the work to get there. For me, my fulfillment is being able to wake up to speak with a man and just give him hope and be a voice in his life for a period of time, so that he can then go be who he needs to be, and no longer carry that weight. So for that young man or that older man, these 60, 70, 80-year-old man there that's never said a word, I would just encourage you that you're going to gain something and a freedom that is really indescribable. It is a weight that is off of you that gives you true life.
Mm. And I would also add, you have to forgive yourself.
Yeah. Yep.
So many of us carry this false narrative that it's our fault. Dude, I'm 6'4", 220. I don't know a single 7-year-old that can take me down. It ain't happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's like, you think about that and it's like, you were a child. Something was taken from you, and it's not fair. And as a boy, you grow up with this narrative that you're supposed to be strong and masculine and figure it out and fight off and protect the home. And it's like, bro, I will whoop every 7-year-old's ass I ever meet. It is just, they don't have a chance. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it's like, as a man, and I'm glad that you can laugh at it, because I laugh at it too. And I go, there's truth in that.
Yeah.
And it's like, you have to forgive yourself for the thing that you couldn't control.
Yeah.
And then people always lean into, well, you have to forgive the people that hurt you. And I think that's also one of the things that you have to decide for yourself. I don't necessarily encourage people which direction to take in that, because I think that that's a very hard and a very individualistic conversation. But I can tell you, giving yourself permission to forgive yourself is absolutely one of the most important components of this. And I'm curious, you mentioned that the person who abused you eventually got caught, they got arrested, they're in prison. What has the experience been like for you? Is there forgiveness there? Do you hold hatred? Did you have to let go? Was it returning to faith that gave you strength to move through it? What has that part been like?
Yeah, faith was really foundational in all of it. And, from a biblical standpoint, God talks about forgiveness. What God doesn't specifically say is that forgiveness is supposed to be instant. And I don't believe it's supposed to be instant. I think forgiveness in the trauma healing space, in my opinion, is really, really far down the road. At least it was for me. I needed to forgive myself. I needed to create an actual real reality. I was living in disassociation for so long, which protected me at one point when I was a child. But now later as an adult, I saw some of those same patterns that I was like, wait a minute, like I'm still doing things that I was doing when I was 13 years old as a way to protect myself. And I don't need to protect myself anymore, right? Like I'm in a safe place now. So I had gone through this entire journey and there was really kind of one piece left. And that was that I needed to, was I going to forgive this man or not? And for me, I'm probably 6.5 years into my healing at this point when I make this decision. And I'll be completely transparent with you. I ended up having this vision of Christ on his last day. And he's getting beaten and whipped. If you know that story, he's getting spit on and whatnot. He gets pinned to a cross. And ultimately in those moments, he says, "Please forgive them, Father, for they do not know what they've done." in that moment, because of my own faith, I thought to myself, if this man gave his life for me and those around me, and that's my belief, then I have to get to a place personally that I have to forgive this person. Now, there's a difference between forgiving and still protecting other children from someone that evil. There's a
Yes,
complete
agreed.
I don't agree with the sin itself. It's a horrible, horrific thing, and that's a completely different topic of what needs to happen to these people that hurt children. But I knew I that was a part of my personal healing of getting to freedom so that I could also speak that if that were to come up in a situation that was similar as mine. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about the story that very few people know. So he went to prison, and right after I spoke and I went and did the conference, whatnot, I was thinking it was over. 30 years after I had gotten out of the abuse, I get a call. This was just about 3 months after I stepped on stage. I got a call from the attorney general in this state that said, I need you to come testify in court against this guy all these years later because he's up to no good again. Now, if I wouldn't have gone through forgiveness in my heart, truly, I would have went into court with a vengeance heart because I had always believed if I ever see this man again, it's going to be the end of his life. That's where I was at. And again, I will do whatever it takes to protect children from getting hurt this way. But I knew in that moment that I could go into court with a heart that was healed and do it the way that it needed to be done. And I did. And so I think, for me and my journey and how God really navigated me, I had to do it the way that I did it to get to where I was.
Hmm. Yeah, it's powerful, and I think for myself, one of the things that I had to do in the letting go process and the forgiveness, it was for my mother, for my grandmother, for the
Yeah.
teachers, it was just like a laundry list of people. I was just like, I have to forgive and let go. Doesn't mean I forget. Trust
Yeah.
me, I have not forgotten. I look down at my hand every day from my mother cutting my finger off. It's not lost on me, and I think that so many people think that you have to pretend it didn't happen, and that then you're right back into the sewage of it all.
Yeah.
And I think forgiveness is powerful because it also allows you to love people. Like,
Yeah.
it allows you to love. It allows other people to love you. It allows the greatest experiences that you can have as a human. There's all of the moments of my life. Look at it like this. There are all of the moments of my life before me telling the story about being molested and abused as a child, and there's every moment after.
Mm.
And every moment after, I can promise you, is so much better because the secret's not there, and the
Yeah.
pain isn't there, and the turmoil and the suffering isn't there. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean I don't have fucking bad days, man, because trust
Sure.
me, I do.
Sure.
There's still days where I'm like, yo, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But most of the time, life is pretty good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just facing that scary thing in front of you. I am super excited for you because I know that you have a brand new book coming out, and I want you to share a little bit more about that, why you wrote it, who's it's for, and
Yeah.
where everyone can find it.
Yeah, so the book is called The Breaker. Again, this is my story. It's kind of a mix of my story mixed with healing. We have some amazing contributors that are in the book. Through the process, we became really good friends with the top people over at Arizona Trauma Institute. They opened up their curriculum to us. They were just blown away by the fact of what my story was, and they were going to give us the research side of things, the legitimate, the hearts and guts of what is going on in this space so that people could understand it from that side too. The really unique thing about my book is my story. You're taking this journey with a boy from, the abuse that happens to success and finally hope and freedom. But my wife is actually the author of the book, and she writes it in a way that also showcases her perspective. So she's speaking to the wife or the family member or whatnot that has someone who is going through this or has gone through this on what to do as well. So we have the healing steps, the story itself, the research behind all of that, and then really the other side and the other lens, which is the person who loves that person that is hurting and what to do. And so this book is called The Breaker. Get it on thebreakermission.com, but we're on Amazon. We just got the green light that it'll be on in some Barnes and Nobles nationwide. And yeah, I mean, there's a mission behind it too, which is the big thing. So we have the book and then a mission that we're building right now that it's going to be a really good place and a resource for those men and women too. I'm speaking to men a lot just because it's my story, but it will help women as well. And so a mission behind that can give them those resources necessary to get to the place of freedom that they need to.
Brilliant. I love that. And I'm so excited for you and for everyone who reads it. And guys, remember, you can go to thinkunbrokenpodcast.com, look up Micah's episode for that information and more in the show notes. My last question for you, my friend, what does it mean to you to be unbroken?
The word that comes to mind is just it's freedom. It's I looked at what I went through as like a puzzle that was put together. And then when I went through everything that I went through, it was scattered and it was broken. I felt like I had lost pieces and whatnot. And then to be able to get to a place now through my faith and through the healing that I went through and all the tools and the lifelines that God gave me, to now really truly feel as if even though it was broken at one point, now I am truly unbroken. And I am free from what is there, and now being on the other side, being able to speak into men to help them get unbroken and free too.
Brilliant. And I love that, man. My hope is that for all of you listening, if you are that man, or if you know a man or someone in your life who could use today's episode and conversation, I encourage you to share this with them with a loving, kind heart, knowing that they might tell you to go fuck yourself. Because the reality is, this is a very hard journey, and it's one that's not easily spoken about. And that's why there have not been a lot of men in 1,000 episodes of this podcast who have come on and shared such a vulnerable experience. My hope is that we can give this to more men, to more women, and to heal this world. Because a big part of my story, something I've mentioned many times over the years, is I want to change the world so much that another child doesn't have a story like mine. But we can't do that if we're a bunch of adults walking around like hurt little boys and girls. With that said, my friends, thank you so much for being here. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and until next time, be unbroken. I'll see ya. Hey, Unbroken Nation, we'll be right back to the show, but I wanted to let you know that you can grab a copy of my first book, Think Unbroken, Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma, for free. If you go to book.thinkunbroken.com, you can download the PDF ebook version of the book and get everything that I know about the baseline of healing trauma for free, downloaded to your email right now. Just go to book.thinkunbroken.com to download your copy of Think Unbroken, Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma for a PDF for your phone. Again, that is book.thinkunbroken.com.